The Holy Gospel this morning is found in St. Luke in the 24th chapter. But on that first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. And while they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but he has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." And then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. So Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. And then he went home, amazed at what had happened. The Gospel of the Lord. You may be seated. So every year, about a month or so out from Easter, right after Lent starts, on the Clergy ELCA Facebook page, of which I am a part, some of my younger colleagues will begin to lament after they have preached for 2 or 3 times on Easter that they're running out of new things to say because, after all, they've done it 3 times. And invariably, one of my colleagues, and this year was a guy who's preaching on his 52nd Easter. So I'm doing the math here. He's got to be in his 80s. Said, well, every now and then God sends something. And lo and behold, as all of us were, gathering around for Easter preaching, ideas, thoughts, and things like that, God said, hey, let me burn down Notre Dame Cathedral in France. See if you can make something of it, preachers. So I think it's every preacher in the land today is going to preach on the fact that the cathedral at Notre Dame burnt down. It's famous, it's iconic, it might be, in fact, the most famous church in the world, and those of you who have been there and seen it know that it is worthy of such a stature. Although for mine, there are others that are a little better, but nonetheless, there it is. And it's interesting, if you were last Monday, if you were around and you saw this kind of iconic church just start to burn, and then if you were able to maybe see a picture or two of what it looks like after the fire had been put out and sort of through the wreckage and rubbish that had landed, there was just this sense that Notre Dame was still going to make it. And indeed it is, because what's interesting is that if you take all the cathedrals in the world, all the beautiful churches, all the music, all the banners, whatever it might be, Easter lilies, the whole thing, add it all together, it's not where God is. There is more God between you and the person you're sitting next to than there is in all the cathedrals and churches in the world. God exists in the spaces of our lives. And what the resurrection shows is that even a tomb, even a tiny little space where you think you might be able to actually hold or contain God is not enough. And that God is out there in the spaces of our lives, in that space that we have between us and the other. Maybe a loved one, maybe a stranger, maybe an enemy. And God, in that liminal space that sort of balances the in and out of our lives, is a constant reminder on this Easter that you don't find God necessarily hanging from a banner. You can't even find God hanging on a cross, because God is free in the world, in the life and the spaces of our lives. But what is also most interesting about last week, because as important as it was for me to be able to be reminded of that piece, last week, last Sunday, something absolutely incredible happened. Something that no one saw coming. Now, you may have missed it too because you were so busy celebrating Palm Sunday and all that kind of stuff that it escaped you. But if you did happen to glance at a Twitter feed or maybe the television, you may have noticed last week that a golfer by the name of Tiger Woods won the Masters. Talk about miracles. About 15 years ago, my parents decided to retire, and they moved to the golf capital of the world. In fact, they only live an hour or so away from Tiger Woods. And my dad, right up until the day he died, regularly golfed 5 days a week. And my mom, even though she's now 29 years old, is still golfing 3 days a week. Golfing has always been part of our family tradition since the day I can remember. I got my first set of clubs when I was 5 years old, I think. And golfing is what we did. I mean, we just did it all the time. Now, fortunately, we lived in Minnesota, so we didn't have to golf between the months of August and June. But July was packed. And that's just, we just did it. My brother, me, that's what we did. And, but, I gave it up a long time ago. But even where I went to college at a small little college outside of Minneapolis. And what was interesting there is the 4 years that I was at college, both the men and the women won what was in those days Division III college national golf championships. All 4 years I was there. Everybody I knew at that school played golf. We all played golf. We even had classes in golf. All right? I mean, I remember one time, we used to, they gave me, I actually paid for this. This is part of my college tuition. I paid college tuition to hit wiffle balls into a garbage can. And the more I hit, the higher my grade got. Now, on retrospect, I should have been asking for rebates. But nonetheless, the point is, we just did it. And I bring this up because when Tiger Woods won the Masters last week, absolutely no one believed he could do it. Now, for those of you who aren't too knowledgeable about golf, and trust me, I do not blame you at all, because when you're looking at things to do, when there's three options, watching grass grow, paint dry on a wall, or play golf, almost everybody chooses either the grass or the paint. And but nonetheless, he was the greatest golfer in the world 20 years ago. In fact, when he was in his young, he was even young when he started, but as he kind of went through, people thought he could be the greatest golfer ever. And then he went through some personal stuff and some tragedies about 10 years ago that completely derailed this world-class, world champion athlete. And all the things that he had accomplished sort of were tarnished by some of the personal demons that he was facing and still is. But when he won the Masters last week, what was so astounding is that all the people that I know that play golf and know about golf were all just in shock that Tiger Woods won. But they weren't in shock that Tiger Woods won a golf game. It was that he won. In other words, we all knew that Tiger Woods always had the capacity to win again. I mean, even now, before he won the Masters last week, he's one of the world's top golfers. So we knew he has all these kind of skills. And to be honest, once you kind of get down some of the basics of golf, it's just routine and practice. And he's an athlete, professional athlete, so he knows how to do this. But to actually win, no one thought he could do it. No one thought that this guy was going to be able to put it all together for 4 days and be able to focus and concentrate and find that thing, whatever it is, that drives us to do or whatever be God has made us to be. Nobody thought Tiger would ever find that again. And so for the last week, amid the crumbling spires of Notre Dame, people are wondering, how did Tiger Woods do this? But that's what's so amazing about the resurrection, is that God pulled it off. God said, I'm going to rise and meet you up in Galilee, but nobody believed him. It seemed like an idle tale. Yeah, sure, you could do it. You're God. We've seen you walk on water, whatever, yada, 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 yada. But when God actually does it, when Jesus actually gets up, goes to Galilee? Everybody's like, whoa! Who saw that coming? Easter is this incredible time where the idlest of tales, the most incredible of promises, is actually kept. And the challenge for you and I who gather here on a day like today is not so much to worry about whether we believe or whatever. It's can we actually accept the fact that God might have did what God said God was going to do? And if God can do that, if God can raise up and keep God's word about something like that, then it's probable that God, when God said, I'm going to love you forever, is still going to love you, even if you don't think God's going to keep God's word, even if you don't believe it. In those waters of baptism, in this bread and this wine, God has promised to love you and be with you forever. And just like God told everybody, hey, I'm going to get up and go to Galilee, and nobody believed God then, there's a lot of people that don't believe God now. And that's fine. God seems to be very comfortable with doubt. Doubt is not the enemy of faith. Doubt is a part of faith. Even the first disciples didn't believe Jesus was going to keep his word. So every year we confirm some kids. In a couple weeks we're going to confirm another 20 kids. And the last few years I've sat down and kind of chatted with the kids for 5 minutes or so about what they remember about church, and all the stuff they've been doing over the last few years in confirmation. So a young guy came up to me and we were sitting there talking, and I said, what do you remember? And he said, I want to know how you made that shot. Now what he was talking about is a couple years ago, over in Worship Lab in the Life Center, I was talking to the kids about how to stay focused. All right? How to amidst all the stuff that goes on in life, how to stay focused to what God is asking you to do or who God has asked you to be. And it's a tough thing to do. But I told them that no matter how far away God seems, that the opportunity is always there to stay focused. And in order to kind of prove the point or drive the point home, what I did is, if you go over to the Life Center, you'll see we have our baptismal font like this. And there is a candle holder, a metal stand for the candle that stands by it. And it's got a little round metal base. And it's just right next, it's in the front of the baptismal font in the Life Center. And so we stood at the very, very front of the Life Center by the stage, and I had a golf club and some golf balls. And I told the kids, just put the ball down there, hit that metal base. So the way Worship Lab goes is, some of the kids are like, oh, I'll try that, and other kids are like, oh, no, don't invite me. So a couple kids got up, tried it, did very well. So then they asked if I would do it. And I have not golfed in a good, long time. And so I grabbed the putter, set the ball down. And one of the beauties of putting in the Life Center as opposed to an actual golf course is you're putting on carpet, okay? Never to be underestimated. I'm sure Tiger Woods would agree it's easier to putt on carpet. And I putted the ball, and it rolled nicely down the center of the aisle and hit the base of the candle. And for the last 2 years, that kid is wondering how I pulled that off. It just so happened that my mom called that night, and I told her that story. My mom said, well, how far is it? And I said, I don't know, 40, 45 feet. She said, you could do that in your sleep. I said, I know, but they don't. We never know what God has in store for us. And for us to be able to say to ourselves that we've got it all figured out and that God couldn't possibly do that, that is just an idle tale, is to miss the glory and the grandeur of Easter, is to miss what this is all about with the banners and the music and all the stuff that we do to celebrate. That God not only keeps God's promise, but God does the things that we wanted to dismiss as an idle tale, the things that we don't know about, the things that we haven't yet experienced. Easter is a wonderful opportunity to expand and explore our knowledge and our relationships, the way in which we live and work and have our being in the glory and grandeur of God's world. So it may be an idle tale to some. But to those, like Dagger Woods, or the folks who are rebuilding Notre Dame, it is not an idle tale. It is a story of God's incredible love, God's incredible power to do the unexpected, and to raise from the ashes the dead to the living.